Welcome to this YSL tutorial. In this session we're going to teach you how to work with basic charts in reporting services. What we'll cover in this session is everything to do with working with charts. We'll start by showing you how to add a chart to a report, and then importantly how to assign fields from a dataset to the various areas of a chart. We'll spend quite a lot of time talking about how to edit and format charts afterwards to tidy them up, including how to add conditional formatting to a chart. And then finally we'll talk about how you can work with multiple data series by adding an extra field to your chart. So let's get started. To begin our chart demonstration, I'm going to show you how to create a basic column chart, which is going to compare a film's box office takings against its budget. So we've already designed the basic data set which shows this information. We've got a film's name and then the budget and box office fields, which we're going to compare in different data series. All I need to do now is choose to insert a chart using the toolbox, and I can do that just by double clicking. If you've seen Microsoft Excel or you're familiar with that application, you'll probably recognise a lot of the chart types in here. They're very, very similar. We're going to stick with a basic column chart for now, so I'm going to select that one and click OK. Then just need to resize the chart to make it a little bit easier to work with, and now we're ready to go. And one thing that's very different to working with Excel charts is that in reporting services, when you're in design view, you're not seeing actual data. This is just a sample of what you might see had you set the chart up properly. So although it looks like I'm displaying information for 6 different categories, 6 different films perhaps, and maybe the box office and budget values, if I actually preview the chart, I'll find out that I don't have any information in there at all. So what I need to do back in design view is tell this chart which field from the dataset goes into which position. To assign fields to various parts of the chart, I need to show the chart data panel, and I can make that appear by clicking anywhere inside the chart area, and it should appear on the right hand side. The first thing I'll do is assign a field to the category groups, and this will set how many columns I end up with in the overall chart. So from the details list here I'm going to select film name, and that means that each column or pair of columns will be represented by a single film. The next thing I need to do is assign some fields to the values area to set the heights of the various columns that we're going to display. So I can do that by clicking the plus symbol in the top right hand corner of the values area and choosing which field I'd like to display. I'll start with the film's budget dollars, which creates a single data series, and if I click on the plus symbol again, I can choose another column, which in this case will be the film's box office dollars, and that creates 2 data series for me. You might notice that by default each field you add to the values area has an aggregate function applied to it, in this case the sum function. Because our chart data isn't grouped, the aggregate will make no difference to the display of the data, so just accept that it's going to be there by default. At this point I think our chart is worth a quick preview to see what it looks like in the real world, see what the actual data looks like. And there we go, you can see we've got the 2 fields represented as 2 different series of data on the chart. All that remains now is to tidy it up with some formatting and labelling and various other techniques. Let's start formatting by making sure that we can see a label for every single film in the chart. At this point we're only seeing a label for every second film, so we can change this back in the design view. Now just as in an Excel chart, if you want to format a bit of a chart, you need to select it first. So I'm going to click on one of the labels down at the bottom to select the horizontal axis labels. If I then right click anywhere on those, I can choose to view its properties. Now the dialog box that appears contains all of the options I need to modify the settings for the x-axis labels. What I'm going to do first of all is on the axis options page, find the interval property and change it from automatic to the value of 1. So that means a label will appear for every 1 column. If I click OK and then preview the report, I should see I now get a label for every single film. I could also then do with getting rid of the axis title box, and I can do that very easily back in the design view by selecting it again using the mouse and then pressing the delete key on the keyboard. That gives you a bit more vertical space as well, and the chart will automatically resize to take that into account. While we're talking about axis labels, we might as well change the formatting of the vertical axis as well. By default, the numbers are just displayed in their raw form, so you get a very, very long number to represent the budgets of our films. What I'd like to do is scale it down so it's displayed in either maybe millions or even billions perhaps. If we head back to the design view, again I can select the part of the chart I'd like to format, and then right click on it and choose to view its properties. In this case I'm going to head to the number page of the dialog box, and I'm going to use the currency format. I'm going to use a couple of decimal places, and I'm going to, instead of showing the values in their normal form, I'm going to choose to show them in billions instead. I also need to change the currency symbol because my regional settings are set to the UK, which is where we're based. So I'd better choose for this example the US dollar. If I choose OK at this point and then preview the report, I should see a slightly neater layout for my label. All that I need to do now is modify the title of the axis, and I can do that again by selecting it. I can just directly change the text here, although I do find it a little bit awkward to do. Let's call this dollars, pounds I've typed in there accidentally. There we go, dollars, billions. And if I preview the report now, that should be a fairly neat looking chart. The next thing I'd like to do is change the position of some of the objects in my chart. For example, I could move the chart title towards the top left hand corner and the legend towards the top right. I can do that in two different ways. If I go back to the design view, perhaps the simplest, most obvious is simply clicking and dragging on the object to move it. If I select the chart title, I get the select and move icon here in the top left hand corner, and if I begin clicking and dragging with the chart title, you'll see that the pale blue area indicates various positions that I could dock my chart title to. I'm going to dock mine towards the top left hand corner. I could do the same thing then with the legend, for the chart, by selecting it and then clicking and dragging. But I could also right click on the object, which I've completely failed to do there. Try it again. Right click on the object and choose to view its properties. And then there will usually be an option to change its position by selecting from a set of 12 option buttons. I'm going to choose the top right hand corner here and then click OK. And if I preview the report now, I ought to see I've got a little bit more space horizontally in the chart. Maybe you feel that layout's a bit neater. Another feature that's quite useful in a chart like this, where the actual values of the columns are quite difficult to read from the left-hand axis, is to assign data labels which will appear at the top of each column and will show the actual values that they represent. So I can do that back in the design view, simply by right-clicking on any column in the series I'd like to add my labels to, and choosing to show the data labels. This now gives me a new element that I can format and modify. If I quickly preview the chart at this point, I'll get again very, very messy numbers. So what I'd like to do is assign the same number format to the data labels as I did earlier with the vertical axis. I can go back to the design view, right click on a single data label and choose to view the label properties. On the number tab, I can choose the currency format, 2 decimal places, show my values in billions, and I'm going to use the US dollar currency symbol. Click OK, preview the report again, and a much neater representation. I can do exactly the same thing for the other series of the film budget dollars as well, but for now I'm going to leave it with just this set. One thing we haven't mentioned yet is how to change the colours of the chart, and in particular the colours of the data series themselves. If I go back to the design view, there are actually 2 ways I can change the fill colour for a data series. I'm going to start with a slightly less obvious one actually. I'm going to view the chart properties dialog box. I can do that by right clicking into the background of the chart and choosing to view its properties. Now on the general page of the chart properties dialog box, there's an option called Color Palette, and what this does is set the overall set of colours that we used in the various series shown in the chart. So by default it's set to bright pastel, but in here I can choose from a variety of other interesting sounding sets of colours. If I choose maybe, I don't know, let's say fire to begin with, you get some fairly horrible looking things like this. So it's really just a case of going through until you find one that you might actually like the look of. I don't particularly like any of those at all. So what you can also do, if I cancel out of this dialog box, is you can set the colour of a data series manually, and to do that you right click on a single column in the series and choose to view its properties. This is hopefully the more obvious way and the way you would have expected to do it in the first place, but on the Fill tab here you can choose a variety of basic types of formatting. I'm just going to go with the basic solid fill colour here, and I can choose from the drop down list whatever colour I like. Let's go with actually maybe something a little bit different than that. There we go, lovely green colour. If I then choose OK and preview the report, that's enough to give you the idea. There is one other useful way to change the colours of your chart, and it goes back to the idea of using a palette for the entire chart. So I'm going to go back to the design view, and I'm going to reset the background colour of this series back to its original setting, which was automatic. And that means that it will be taking its colours now from whichever palette is assigned to the chart. Now the next option I'm going to change, I'm actually going to use the properties window rather than the properties dialog box. I'm going to pin that in place temporarily so I can see all the options available. And what I'd like to do is select the chart itself so that I can see its properties, and you can hopefully spot here already that there's an option to change the palette, as we saw on the dialog box earlier on. What I'm going to do here is, rather than choosing one of the existing palettes, I'm going to choose the one called Custom instead. And that apparently deletes all of my columns, although they are technically still there. It's just that they don't have any fill colour. And that's because I haven't yet defined the colours for the custom palette, which you can see in this property here. If I click on the property itself, on the word collection, I'll see a little button with 3 dots appears. And if I click on that button, I can now define which colours I'd like my chart to use. I can click the Add button, and then choose which colour I'd like to use for that particular colour. I'm going to choose bright blue to begin with. What you can see then is that all the columns in the chart, all the data series, use the same colour, because that's the only one that's been defined. If I add a second colour, however, and change the option for that, you can see that the second data series now uses the second colour. If I had a third data series in this chart, so a third column for each film, that would wrap around and use the blue colour again, and then the fourth series would use red, and then blue, and then red again. So it simply wraps around and reuses the same set of colours. So the more colours you add, the more variety you'll end up with in your chart. But it's worthwhile mentioning that particular option. If you have lots and lots and lots of series in a chart, it can be a slightly quicker and easier way to assign different colours to different series. The final thing I'd like to show you in terms of formatting is how to assign conditional formatting to parts of a chart. So what we're going to do is show the film with the highest box office takings with a different coloured column to all of the rest. So to do that, I need to right click on the single column in the series and choose to view its properties. And on the Fill page of the dialog box, rather than using automatic, I'm going to generate a function or an expression using the expression builder dialog box. So you might have seen this in one of our previous videos where we talked about conditional formatting in reporting services. We're going to use the good old if function, or if function as it's called in reporting services. What I'd like to do is test if the value of the box office takings for a particular film, so I'm going to use the fields category down here, double click on film box office dollars. I want to check if that is the maximum value of box office dollars for the entire data set that I'm working in. So I'm going to check if film box office dollars is equal to the max of film box office dollars, and then I need to add in a single extra piece of information with a comma and in a set of double quotes the name of the data set that I'm looking in. So I can actually see that name down here, DTS film budget. Now if that's true, then I want to format that particular column in a different colour to all of the rest. So if I'm looking at the film with the highest box office takings, type in a comma here, head back to the constants category and choose what colour you would like that column to be. So I'd like mine to be lime green. Otherwise, I need to type in another comma. I'm going to show them in the standard red that they already are. can then close the round brackets, click OK again, and hopefully when I preview my report, I'll see that the one column that is the highest in that entire range is a different colour to all of the rest. There's lots of other examples you can do with conditional formatting along those lines as well, but that was just a quick, neat, easy one to show you. The example chart that we've been working with for this entire tutorial was a very, very simple chart. If you remember when we built it, we added the film name to the category groups and then individually added in different numerical fields into the values area. What I'd like to show you is that it's possible to create different series of data by adding a single field to the series groups panel instead. So I'm going to show you that in a slightly different report. I've already created the data set for this one, and if I can show you what's stored in there, we have the film names again, and we're going to count how many film names there are. And we're going to do that for each studio and certificate combination. So we're going to see studio names listed along the horizontal axis, and a different coloured column for each different film certificate. So I need to start by adding a chart via the toolbox, so I can do that by double-clicking. And I'm going to stick with a basic column chart to begin with, although I may well change that shortly. And I need to increase the size of my chart, and then expose the chart data panel again. Now to show the studio names along the horizontal axis, I simply need to select studio name as the category group. But instead of just adding in a value to be displayed as a series, what I'm going to do is choose to add an option to the series groups, and to do that I'm going to use the certificate. And hopefully what you can see, although it's not exactly what we're going to see in the real world, but we've got different coloured columns for each set of each separate certificate. All I need to do now is add a single field to the values area, and I'm going to add the one remaining field that I have, which is the film name, and that should automatically apply a count to that field because it's not it's text data rather than numeric. If I finally preview that report, it's going to look a little bit messy. But what I should be seeing is for each individual film studio, I get a different coloured column for each separate certificate. And this chart could definitely use some tidying up. To start with, we don't have quite a wide enough chart to display all the data series clearly. So I'm going to change the chart type into a stacked column. So head back to the design view. Now fortunately I don't have to recreate the chart again from scratch. All I need to do is right click anywhere in the background of the chart and choose to change its type. And I'm going to choose the one called stacked column instead. If I click OK, what I should now see, if I preview the report again, is that each different film certificate is displayed as a different colour in the same column. Again, I'm going to modify the x-axis or the horizontal axis so that I can see every single studio name rather than one for every 5 columns. So back to the design view, right click on the horizontal axis, choose to view its properties, and change the interval of the labels to 1. If I click OK now and preview the report again, I now see a sensible label for every single film studio. And from that point on, everything else is just the same techniques of formatting as we've talked about already. The point about this particular chart is that to generate the different series groups, we didn't add them individually into the values area, we added a single field to the series groups panel. One slightly odd feature about formatting charts with a series group is that I can no longer individually select the different series. So I couldn't, for example, choose the blue columns to change just those colours, or the orange ones to change just those. Effectively, the only way to change the colours on this chart is to change the palette of the overall chart, as we've seen earlier on. If I right-click in the background of the chart and choose, I'll try that again, chart properties, there we go, finally. And on the colour palette property, I can modify that to change all the colours in one go. Now that might be a little bit unfortunate. For example, what if I wanted to choose exactly what colour I wanted the U films to be, and the PG films and the 18 films and so on? Effectively, the only way to do that is to create an expression which calculates your colours. So to calculate the colours for this chart, I'm going to show you how to use the switch function, which you might have seen in one of our earlier videos on conditional formatting and reporting services. If I head back to the design view, I'm going to change the fill colour of each of these columns by using the Series Properties dialog box, heading to the fill page, and then clicking the FX button next to the colour choice. Remove whatever's in the dialog box already, and start by typing out the switch function, which I can't spell at this point. There we go, switch. Open a set of brackets, and then I'm going to head down to the next line here to build up the argument pairs on separate rows. So each argument pair goes along the lines of this. If I choose, first of all, I want to test if the certificate equals U. Follow that with a comma, and then choose what colour I'd like that to be. I'm going to go for bright green here. Then another comma, and on the next line, I want to test if the certificate equals PG, for example. And then go back to the, type in another comma, go back to the list of constants, and choose a different colour. And go for aqua, it's going to look like a lovely chart. And then I carry on building up that sequence of arguments in exactly the same way. So certificate equals 12, comma, constants, and so on and so on and so on. So I've finished building the switch function now, testing for every single possible certificate and generating a unique colour for each one. There's not the nicest set of colours, but it's enough to get the idea. And I've finally closed the round brackets right at the very end. All I need to do now is click OK, and click OK again. And when I finally preview the report, I should see that the chart now uses the colours that I've asked for. I think I should go back and revise my list, my colour choice, but that's the one way you can control exactly which colours appear for which series when you've got a grouped series in your chart. If you've enjoyed this training video, you can find many more online training resources at www.wiseowl.co.uk.